Hello, welcome to Restoring Tradition. This is Judith Sharpe, and welcome to this special podcast regarding what we're hearing from some about the war, the undeclared war. The date today is March 4th, 2026. Please, friends, hit the like button and the subscribe buttons if you like what we're presenting to you. We need to do that for YouTube purposes. Many of you already know that I actually watch a bit of national news and try to keep informed about what's happening in the world by watching alternative media like Judge Napolitano and his guests. And that brings me to our guest, John Sharpe, and why I've asked him to help us today. You all know him. Yes, he's my son. So let's get this discussion started. John, on the Judge's program, just a couple of days ago, he and Chaz Freeman were talking about what's going on with the U.S., Israel, and Iran. And they brought up what makes a war just. And that actually was the title of his podcast. So several of his guests also have been bringing up the Iraq war. And really, I believe this topic needs to be explored. And in my humble opinion, John, you know more about this topic than really most of them, and I mean most of them. And the reason I say that is because your years of studying and writing about the just war doctrine, as explained in the compendium you put together in, I think it was 2005, the Neocon books. For example,
in the free time after getting thrown out of the Navy to read all day.
Right. And for example, the subtitle of the Neocon book, Just War Principles, a condemnation of the war in Iraq. So you know all about that. And on the front of the dust cover, and let me read it, please, real quickly, and then we'll talk. It reads, asserting the traditional Christian just war doctrine against the neoconservative caricature that masks violence and aggression. And I just want, frankly, I just really want our audience to see that. I don't know if it's backwards. It looks backwards.
It looks good here.
Okay, good. Backwards, probably. Anyway, hi, John.
If this weren't an emergency live broadcast, you could have your assistant prepare a clip of it, but it's
okay.
Too much under pressure.
Right? I'll do it. Anyway, hi. How are you doing?
Hi, Mrs. Sharpe. I'm fine. How are you?
All right. What do you want to talk about? Let's talk.
Well, how did I saw Chaz's broadcast, but that it was going on, and I saw the title and it was interesting, but I didn't listen to it. Was it worth listening to as far as you're concerned? Did they get into the just war thing very well or very much?
They mentioned Thomas Aquinas. They mentioned Aristotle. They mentioned St. Augustine. So like they were really, talking about where it came from, but they didn't explain it. I mean, they didn't say what any of those men said about it, really.
Yeah, and it's tricky because you can approach it from a very technical level and a common sense level. And the common sense level is that you don't get to commit an act of violence unless it's in self-defense. That's the same as if you're walking down the street and you can't just go punch a guy because you think to yourself, well, he looks dangerous and he might hit me. I mean, if that were the law, people would just be beating the snot out of one another on the street, all day long, all the time. And that, and the dicey part with the PR machine that's employed by, our masters in Washington and elsewhere is when you have that common sense sort of reaction, then they get highly technical on you. And they talk about, enriching uranium and the danger to this and the geopolitical order and the rules-based order. And they go all, it gets all somewhat esoteric to kind of outfox you. And then you can meet them on their level with some additional esoteric discussions of, well, what is international law and what are the laws of war? And are there, very technical, solid philosophical grounds? You don't have to be a Catholic. You don't have to be an Aristotelian who believes in, certain aspects of moral philosophy. You can just reasonably lay out with principles of law that most in the civilized world that follow the Anglo-Saxon tradition of law, which goes back, of course, to Rome, before the time of our Lord. And you can lay out certain principles of order, but they're somewhat technical. And we're just told that certainly during Iraq, we were told it's all passé at the era of terrorism. makes all those rules, not only antiquated but ineffective. And you remember there was the first time around with Iran recently, back in June of last year or before, there were some these reels that people put together now on social media where they get clips of sound bites from talking heads in the news, and it was Condi Rice and all the neocon crowd from back in 2002 and 2003, the American Enterprise Institute folks. And you remember this catchphrase, well, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. You refer that? I'm sure Condi Rice said that. Does that ring any bells? Somebody's muted. I'm not hearing. I guess we lost our interviewer.
Uh-oh. How did that happen?
There she is. You remember that phrase? The smoking gun could be a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
And the idea is that when you suggest some hypothetical injury that could happen, like a nuke going off in Los Angeles, you kill 7-8 million people, wipe out an entire city. The neocons and the manipulators of just war theory will say, well, that risk is that the harm that could be caused by such an event is so grave and so serious that gives us the right to intervene to make sure that never happens. Say, well, what are the grounds for that? Well, so-and-so could have a weapon. And because if he did have a weapon and if he decided to use it, the damage would be so severe that we just have to go in. But that's a, an obvious logical error. If you play that out as a reductio ad absurdum, just play that out to its most absurd consequence to show how untenable that is. It applies to any nation on the planet. It's possible that the other non-nuclear countries could have a nuclear weapons program, and it's possible that they could develop from latent capability into actual production, and then they could build a delivery system, and then they could form the intention of using it, and then they could use it. That applies across the board. The same as the guy on the street, across the street, who he has a gun or he's carrying a baby. He's on the way to baseball practice. And, well, why did you assault that man? Or technically, as the lawyers would say, you committed a battery. If you go up and punch him in the nose, well, he had a baseball bat. Well, why did you do? I thought he was going to hit me. Well, he was also on the way to practice. Well, you never know, though. I mean, I couldn't take any chances. And this is the infantile. You can't even call it logic, because I don't think. Do you think that when Rubio and these others get on the news to sell this to the Americans, they're not selling just war criteria? I mean, Rubio.
Oh my goodness.
There's been 3 or 4 different stories, and the most recent one is, well, we knew Israel was going to attack, and Iran might have attacked some of our people in return as some kind of proxy retribution. So on the off chance that might have happened, we just had to go get them. And that's, again, it's just so.
It's also phony anyway, John.
From any common sense approach to what was decided. I don't know if I have I think I have the book on my shelf. If I know I'm turning my back to you, so I apologize. But if I can find it quickly, or maybe think in the back of my mind where it is, and then I'll get it and bring it down. But there was something put together back in the 1930s, where there was a meeting in Belgium or somewhere of Catholic moral theologians and moral philosophers putting together a program of international ethics. And it was basically like a catechism of international law from Catholic moral thinkers and international lawyers, jurists or jurists, Jurist. So the big brains in canon law, international law, moral law, the law of nations, and moral philosophy, moral theology, and they came together and put this. It's a catechism, but it's like the Catechism of Trent. It's several hundred pages, and it's all just about relations between nations. And unequivocally, in that book, as well as in every other book you can put your hands on, certainly from the Catholic perspective, the idea of a preemptive war, preemptive as distinct from, preventive, the idea of a preventive war as distinct from preemptive. Preemptive means the guy with the bat crosses the street, he raises the bat and he starts to swing, and you have every reason to think it's going to hit your skull if you don't do something about it. That's, you're preempting. You don't have to wait to be hit in the face in order to pop him in the nose. Preventive is Well, he had a baseball bat. He was on the way to baseball practice. I didn't want to take any chances, so I went over and kicked him somewhere. That idea of a preventive war, which is what Rubio said we're doing. We are taking out the ballistic missile capability of the Iranians because we think they might use that capability against us. And by the way, not even really outside their sphere of influence. No one has said they're going to come here and do that. It's all, well, we've taken some ships or aircraft and we've moved within, several hundred or several dozen miles of their territorial limits, basically exposed ourselves to whatever this threat is. And if they're going to come get us, well, we better get them first. The whole idea is completely off the table from any common sense morality. And
John, they change it every day anyway. I mean, every day you
of
turn
course.
around, they've got a new idea.
But I don't, again, the reason I asked about the program with Chaz and the judge is whether they got into the charter, because the conservatives that you preach to, and I know we don't like the term because it's the same, this false dichotomy of conservative and liberal, but the traditionalists, traditionally minded people, we're taught to be skeptical of the UN because the UN, when it was created, was an instrument of globalism, this kind of one world government type thing. And that's, I'm not saying there's not truth in that. Whatever truth there is in that, well and good. I think, in fact, Father Fahey, didn't he translate one of his very last works was Waters Flowing Eastward? It wasn't an original authorship. I think it was a Russian text that he translated or was involved in, just sort of about the global, international long conspiracy, against Christian civilization. And there's some very profound criticisms of the UN and who was behind it, and the sort of the waspy Masonic background between all that, and that's fine. But the reality is, if you look at Article 2 and 51, Article 2 is the how are we pledging not to make war with one another, and Article 51 is the reservation of the right of self-defense. Those two articles, at least, you can say fully incarnate and codify Catholic principles and principles really of common sense. Article 2 being when a member state, or when a state joins the UN and becomes a member state, a treaty is just an agreement, right? It's just an agreement between nations. They're making an agreement to not commit acts of violence against other member states. And it says very clearly, no member state shall against another member state violate the territorial integrity or the sovereignty, political sovereignty. So you can't, drive tanks into their territory, across their borders. You can't fly it into their airspace, and you can't shoot their heads of state or their citizens. You have to respect the sovereignty as sort of a legal matter, and you have to respect the territory. And that's every member state has pledged to behave that way towards the other member states. And then Article 51 says, well, nothing, we may not read Article 2 to take away our right to self-defense. So, the Americans, I'm sure at some point would be clever enough to invade Iran. And then when the Iranians fight back and try to kill our people moving in there, we'll say, well, you're violating the UN Charter because you promised not to attack us, and that's about as credible as some of the things that we've heard today.
Yes, exactly.
And there's a great, in one of the neocon volumes, I think it's number 2, which is the one that was more on the politics and some of the intrigue, the intel and the lies about WMD and all that. There's a great comment from a British international lawyer who said, it's like going into someone's house and stealing a TV, and you're armed, you have a pistol in your belt or, in your waistband, and the guy comes out and points a gun at you and says, hey, don't take my TV. And then you pull the gun out and shoot him. And you say, oh, it's just self-defense. I mean, he threatened me with a weapon. He's like, yeah, but you're in the house stealing his TV. What sense does that make? And that's exactly what the Americans said 20 some years ago in Iraq, was that we're just, remember the, this problem with the IEDs, improvised explosive device, which killed so many of our kids, and so many colleagues of mine, friends, maybe former friends, that they don't like my politics, were so proud of themselves because they were developing, this technology to defeat these remote, whether it be microwaves or lasers or whatever, to defeat these roadside bombs that the Iraqis would build. And, we're protecting our boys. Like, well, yeah, that's fine. but we're in the awkward position now as Americans of saying every one of those lives that you save, you're leaving a life with a rifle and a gun and a grenade launcher to go kill more Iraqis. And so how can you say, well, I've invaded your country, now I have a right to defend myself when you try to expel me? I mean, and that's the problem is the logic is so, it's not just shallow, but it's evil. It's satanically twisted and shameful. And the whole one of the things that you hear in the media frequently is, well, we're not a fan of the Ayatollah. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not glad he's gone. I don't know about you, but I really, this will get me in trouble with some of my old, non-friends.
Well, let's see if it gets you in trouble with me. Go on.
That we had, well, decades ago before we had the falling out with the rest of the world, where as a Catholic, you can defend just war principles, but for some reason you're expected to do that by saying things like, well, I'm not saying Saddam was a good guy, or Gaddafi's obviously evil, or it's a good thing that Assad is gone. You have to, or if I'm not a fan of Putin, I'm just skeptical about you. And I don't know why there's always this expectation of these caveats. I never met the Ayatollah. I have friends that knew people in the Iraqi regime, almost dead now. I'm sure these friends, or a friend. I never knew Gaddafi. I knew some priests that sort of knew people in his regime, but we don't know these people, so we have really no grounds to say, oh, he's a bad guy, he's a good guy, he's a neutral guy. Who knows what kind of guys these are? We're told we're given certain wave tops, certain impressions in the media of what's going on in these countries, and we're told, oh, they're gassing their own people, they're killing their own people. Well, that's covered in your first volume there that you held up.
And that also changes, by the way.
In the Jude Winniski interview, the lengthy 70, 80-page interview, which a reviewer in Newsmax, of all places, said that, like, this is the first legal brief in Saddam's defense. If he's on the stand in the international court, this is the brief from the defense lawyer, saying that many of these charges, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them, about the suppressing the uprising in Basra and the gassing of the Kurds and the gassing using chemical weapons in the Iran-Iraq war, that was all manufactured, and it's well established by credible forensic evidence that all that was manufactured. So when someone says,
people need to read that.
Yeah, and it's because it's the same thing over and over again. I mean, your little grandson, who's the guy behind the curtain there, the Wizard of Oz, who runs all your graphics, he's the one who's put together these screenshots of, we have to take care of the Ayatollah because he's killed his own people. He's trying to make weapons of mass destruction. And I forget the third thing. Maybe he can scream it out from the back. But it's like, wow, is that really as clever as you've gotten in the last 25 years? As he kills his own people, makes WMD, and sponsors terror, right? Because Saddam the allegation, which even if proven, it's questionable whether it's a crime, would send money to the families of Palestinian fighters who were killed by trying to liberate their land from an internationally illegal occupying force. And so that's bad, because you're sending, we can send charity, but you can only send charity to the West Bank to erect another settlement. You can't send charity to the people whose land has been occupied, and the whole, I don't, to go a little far afield, and I've told you before, it's better if it's a conversation, but I get talking and there's no structure.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a question to go on.
Well, you're not helping to keep me, focused. But part of the problem too with just war is that there's so many geopolitical intricacies in terms of, let's be clear, if you go back far enough, the expulsion of the natives and Christians, or not so much the expulsion, but when the Turks, the Seljuk Turks from Arabia took over the Holy Land, we had the first conflict, which is the Crusades are the focal point, right? The Christians, and I'm not saying there weren't abuses in the Crusades, because I think there's a lot of credible literature to suggest that, as is typical of fallen human beings, the behavior of the Crusaders was not always beyond reproach, right? Yeah. And that's a given, and that should be stated, because there is this this desire to provoke a war between the Christians and Muslims, which is there is an antagonism, but it's also falsely exaggerated, and it's provoked on purpose. We all know about that. But clearly there was the desire I think the history establishes that there was a desire to protect pilgrims. Christians wanted to go to the Holy Land to visit the holy places. Those holy places became occupied by a power that was hostile to Christianity, which many have speculated was actually a creation of Judaism, that the Islam is an offshoot, is partly an offshoot of Christianity and partly of Judaism, designed to give those who couldn't come all the way to Judaism some middle ground so that they could leave Christianity. So that's, like in shorthand, you might have someone, I don't know if Mr. Hoffman will take me to task for this, because he's certainly expert in many of these things and probably would have all kinds of problems with what I'm about to say. But there are credible sources who have suggested that Islam is just one gigantic black op, done by our, Israeli friends before they were Israelis to have another way of siphoning Christians away from the faith. Whether that's true or not, interesting. But there's that hostility. But as Ross, or one of my boys, was just asking the other day, I think it was his older brother, one of the concepts that we have in law and that Catholics are certainly very eager to uphold is this notion of custom, that going back before Christ, and certainly in St. Thomas and our philosophical tradition, we have this idea that custom, which is a long entrenched habit in a society that is so continuous and so pervasive and so recognized that it literally elevates to the status of law. And Thomas, following Aristotle and others, will say it's not just kind of on par with law, but ultimately it almost trumps law. It's almost more binding than law, and it certainly has the force of law, and it interprets law. So if there's a question about how someone should behave in a certain area, if you can point to a tradition that goes back for a long time, that this is what people are expected to do, even if it's not in the written law, it becomes customary. And so that's a principle of human society. And so one of the boys asked me, well, what about, French Revolution? The French Republic is created, cuts the head off all the Christians and aristocrats. But then after 200 years, can you still say, well, I'm not going to obey the speed limit in Paris because I don't acknowledge the French Republic? It's an illegal government. In theory, you could probably make that argument, but in practice, I think most Catholic theologians and moral authorities would say, well, at some point, a speed limit just helps the common good. So there's no harm in just going the speed limit and saying, well, that speed limit was put in place by the French Masonic government. That's not going to get you off the hook, especially if you run over a kid because you're going too fast around the Arc de Triomphe. Right. Same thing about the Arab and the Turkish occupation of the Holy Land. After, what did they come in, 500, 600, 700, and then really have 1,000 years of that land. There's natives there, originally Phoenicians, Palestinians. I guess, who is it? Huckabee said there's no such thing as a Palestinian, right?
One of them did.
That's just made up. They were the gap fillers while the Jews were in Egypt. I guess it was just empty, right? There was nobody there. But anyway, there's clearly lots of Arabs there. So it's a mix of imports from Arabia and Turkish blood and the natives. But after 1,000 years, it kind of is what it is, right? That's where this idea of custom. So the Christians could possibly dispute, well, and when St. Helen was there finding the true cross, that belonged to Christians. Well, yeah, but it doesn't mean that the Arabs don't have a claim too of 1,000 years. And that then becomes the real problem with all of this, because think about all the states that were on the list that wasn't it Wesley Clark? And he's hardly let's be honest, he's with the middle name Khan, K-H-N. He's not a Catholic, so he's not what you would say on our side theologically or geopolitically. But he was the one who spilled the beans about this list of 7 countries.
Right.
And I can't speak with any authority about Somalia or some of the others. I know you have people on your program who can. But certainly when it comes to people that were closer to my contacts, the Libyans, the Iraqis, Iranians. I think your friend Mike Jones went to a conference on certain debated matters of World War II in Tehran that was hosted by Ahmadinejad. He was a speaker there.
Do you know he's dead? They killed him.
Who's that? B. Michael Jones?
No, the president, the old, you just mentioned him.
Oh, Ahmadinejad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
he's gone. And too bad, because I liked him.
Yeah, well, me too. so the Iranians, Iraqis, Libyans, Syrians, Lebanese, who's the Egyptians? I mean, they're fence sitters now, especially given the Muslim Brotherhood. But what's the uniting factor of all these regimes is that they, in one way or another, they either materially or militarily or financially or rhetorically support the Palestinian cause. And they support,
that's exactly right.
They support the natives who maintain this position that the colonization of Palestine, following the mandate and the Balfour Declaration and everything that your people know all about and have heard all about, they maintain that still hasn't been going on quite long enough for custom to kick in, where someone going back to this law of custom saying, hey, the Jews moved in from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from elsewhere, and they've been here long enough that we have to just say it's there. The way you would say, look, a speeding ticket in France isn't less of a speeding ticket because I'm a monarchist who really thinks that Louis XVI's, descendants are still in charge. I mean, I might think that. I have issues with the history of the United States. Like after the Civil War, it really turned into a different country. It wasn't legally the same as what the original states signed up for. But it is what it is. I can't go into court and say I'm not paying my speeding ticket because I think I'm south of the Mason-Dixon line, right? It is what it is. But the Palestinians would say, well, that's not settled yet because we've been fighting the whole time. I mean, we've literally been resisting since it started, and that resistance hasn't stopped, as what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank proves, and with the Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. There's no question that that's an active conflict and that's still disputed territory. And the only reason these other countries and their heads of state are on the chopping block is because they have refused to knuckle under and say, yes, we recognize that the state of Israel has legitimate claims to the entire territory. And of course, Tucker called out Huckabee just a couple of weeks ago when I wonder about Tucker. I mean, because all these guys with their money and fame, it's questionable. How do they get away with what they get away with? You have Ross says you have hundreds of subscribers now. I have like -7 subscribers. But it's I have to give Tucker credit for forcing Huckabee to say, yeah, the chosen people do own the Euphrates to the Nile, and if they took all of that, that would be just fine. That's what God wants.
That he said.
And that's what all of this is about. And let's be totally honest.
Yes.
Then you go back to your original question, like, where does the just war doctrine? So you'd have to say to Rubio or someone who, I don't know if he could follow any of what we just talked about at all, or he could hear, even with his gigantic ears, could he even hear what we're talking about? The logic is, there were people who lived somewhere for 1,000 years that other people were forcibly imported. And in order to entrench them, they started murdering civilians and not only committing acts of terrorism against the civilian population, but against the British who were in charge. You remember the King David Hotel and all that, the Stern Gang, the Irgun, the others, that erupted in a conflict that's literally occupiers and forced, what the politically correct term, what they claim we did. I'm not saying we didn't, but to the Native Americans, these colonizers, right, move in, push the natives out instead of converting them, just kill them or move them out of the way. That's what was done. There's never been a period where there was no resistance. And if the neighboring countries say, we think this native population needs support, the same way we think we must support the Ukrainians, and the same way we think we must support the Iranian people to rise up against their government, and the same way we had to support the Kosovars, under Milosevic, and the same way we want to support the Kurdish in Iraq who have to be liberated from Iraq, not from Turkey because they're a useful ally, but the Kurdish in Iraq, we want them liberated, and the way we want to support the native population in Syria, or the populations, the different ethnic groups. And when Daniel comes on your program, he'll say, well, all the color revolutions are the same, the Baltic states and all these. We, the United States, have to constantly funnel money to the populace to help them rise up and overthrow their government. But if the Iranians, Libyans, Iraqis do that to the indigenous people in this contested piece of land, well, they're bad because we've decided that the colonizers are actually the owners and you can't possibly support them. And even if you support them just with rhetoric, just with speech, that gives us a right to bomb you to make you shut up. And that's their version of the just war doctrine.
Okay, now I have a question.
So I don't know. What do we do with that?
I don't know. Lots of luck. Did the popes, any of the popes, pre-Vatican II popes ever write any encyclicals or anything about the just war doctrine, or did they? Was it ever enshrined?
I mean, it's interesting. I don't think. I mean, you don't have an encyclical on it the way you have, if you say, well, tell us about religious liberty, you could point to Leo the 13th, Libertas, or something like that. What you do have is long-standing tradition. For example, I mean, I think that the issue is that this was understood to be so fundamental. You didn't
need an encyclical.
I mean, it's like saying, did the Pope ever write an encyclical about lying? Well, no. I mean, I'm sure he makes allusions to, great saints who always told the truth, or bad men who are in hell because they lie all the time or whatever, but you're not going to get an encyclical on it. If you look at the Catechism of Trent, which goes back, that was 1570 for a raw, like round figure. So that's 450 years, right? 450 years ago. Trent discusses it all. This all comes under the heading of the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, and what are the exceptions? And the recognized exceptions has always been capital punishment. The church has always defended the idea, leaving aside the abuse, because I think a lot of us are, we radicals have our lefty streak in us, and so we're skeptical of the state, just sending people to the electric chair. But in principle, the power of a state to take a life, in view of a heinous crime, has always been maintained by the church. Capital punishment, self-defense, of course. That's the guy with the baseball bat comes over, and if he's so strong and you have to shoot him in order to get him off you, if you happen to kill him, sorry, but it's not strictly, it's not murder, it's not premeditated murder. And then the third exception was killing in a just war. But the Catechism says a just war, which raises the implication, or you can infer from that, well, then killing in an unjust war is not saved from condemnation under the fifth commandment.
But I don't suppose Trent that explained exactly what an unjust war was at that point.
No, and that's why I was trying to find this book, because what you have, if, for example, read the old Catholic encyclopedia from the early 1900s, the one published in the United States in New York, and you look up. It's a bit like the Summa, where you had to look in odd places to find things. But there's a fantastic article on what they call papal arbitration. They're examining the question of how much authority does the church have over civil society, which is one of the things before you put the camera on. We were talking about how this just war is a great theory, but what authority does it have? Like, does it actually operate? And I think we're past that, because it's obvious that it doesn't. It's not stopping anyone. It's like Trump telling the Spanish, like, it's too bad that you don't want us to use your airspace, but we'll come if we want anyway. Yeah. But in the papal arbitration article, there's an interesting discussion of how the popes constantly, rather than purporting to command the kings, I mean, I think those who are opposed to the Middle Ages will say that, the church ran everything and it was superstitious, stuffy, etc. But the reality is that the popes were performed as arbitrators when there were feudal conflicts between heads of state, or between the lower feudal lords who were fighting, and the popes would constantly try to get them to stop. They would constantly tell them, don't settle your disagreements with the force of arms, as opposed to with reason and discussion and compromise. And again, the reason there's no encyclical on it, or one of the other reasons, is you're all familiar, your listeners, with Iota Unum, the great treatise on the Second Vatican Council by Romano Amerio, and critique of the Vatican II, mindset, if you will, the liberal modern Catholic view. And so he surveys all kinds of things that's way beyond just the Vatican II documents. And he's got a great article in there on the just war. And he talks about how Cardinal Ottaviani, the great, the great critic of the new mass, was violently opposed to nuclear weapons, and even upheld and gave a long allocution or a long presentation at the Second Vatican Council, upholding, believe it or not, the passage, I believe it's Gaudium et Spes, that condemns nuclear weapons as a kind of weapon that's beyond, like it can't be used justly because it kills too many people.
Yeah, I can't imagine who would ever be just.
Yeah, and so Ottaviani, gave this long intervention in support of that particular passage. But Amerio references that. But what Amerio also says is that he quotes Cicero, and he says, God gave, or the creator, whatever how he's going to refer to God, the way we think of a personal God, gave beasts fangs and claws, and when they have a debate, they bite each other and they try to, rip each other's flesh and claw their eyes out. He gave man reason. He gave man reason and a mouth for dialogue and for discussion. And he says very clearly that combat is the way beasts settle their disagreements, not the way men settle their disagreements.
Yeah, very interesting.
And of course, that's part of the problem, because when you listen to someone like Rubio, let the Secretary of Defense's name not be mentioned, because it's beyond.
You mean the Secretary of War?
Yeah, that's not. I refuse to use that, because that's that the whole Secretary of War, the Department of War thing, is not part of federal law. That in Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which governs the armed forces, it all says Department of Defense. And so when they changed the labels on the podiums, or podia for the critics, the Latin scholars in the audience, it was an executive order. Trump promulgated an executive order saying
to make him defensive war.
Yeah, everything that's not covered by Title 10, like federal law requires me to refer to the Defense Department in certain like official documents, but all the other, when I have a press conference, I put a new sign on the podium. It's just such, it's theater. It's just games. But
when you're ready, I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, forget SecDef, but this. I think also in the modern era, part of the resort to war is that the power of reason and discussion is gone. You can't sit down. Apparently, no one can sit down with an opponent and have a rational argument and come to some middle ground and some compromise, because both the power of logic is gone or not used willfully, and then of course there is the lack of trust, right? No. If I were on the Iranian side and the Americans said, "Well, sign a paper here, promise to give up this, give up that, give up the other thing, and we won't bomb you." How about how gullible are you, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, one of the things that you and I talked about before was, or you mentioned, the similarity between the run up to the Iraq war and itself, and this same thing with Iran. Can you help us with that at all? Can you see the similarities?
Yeah, I think everyone sees them. I will cede the place to my elders. Jon Stewart, for all his problems, which we wouldn't agree necessarily with his worldview or all that, on the Daily Show, did a fantastic, absolutely fantastic one of these little series of clips. These mock-ups that run on like a trailer almost of clips that he did on one evening of his show, with clips of this old guard that I mentioned, of Condi Rice and Bill Kristol and all these, and on the Catholic side, I don't think Michael Novak was in it, but certainly Elliot Abrams and George Weigel and all these characters, Cheney, of course, Rumsfeld, talking about the WMD, the sponsor of terrorism, and the murdering your own people, and that's all we hear over and over and over again. And the one interesting point with the just war doctrine that is something that has to be taken seriously, although it's slightly technical, but you will hear from many Catholics who are in favor of these wars, well, the government has all the intel, like we have no idea. You don't know what Trump sees, which is why it's partly interesting when some of the congressmen come out of these this gang of eight, they come out of these briefings and they say there's still no evidence. So that's comforting for those who oppose the war, because you can say, well, even the people who've seen the secret information say there's nothing in the secret information. At least in the old days, they had the courtesy to have the Israelis fabricate some intelligence and then pass it to the Americans, and then the Americans can say, oh, we just got an update from our allies. Well, is that true? Well, I don't really know. I don't know where this came from. So it might be true. I mean, now we're past, you don't even need might be true, to get us into this. But, back to the just war thing for a minute, there has been this presumption that the heads of state know more than we do, and that because of that, they're entitled to the benefit of the doubt. So the average soldier or the average citizen is told, even by Augustine, frankly, like Augustine is told if there's or Augustine, not is told, he tells us, and we're told by Augustine, if a soldier follows his king into an unjust war, then the soldier is not to be blamed, because it's the king who's making the decision and committing the act of injustice. And that's always the overtone of, well, these people know much more than we do, and they have all their secret information, and we have to just be trusting, which is why, as I did on that LifeSite interview some months ago after the June bombing, it's very important, I think, for us with the just war framework to listen to what the claims actually are, because the claims are never, and they weren't with Saddam, even as bad as it got with Colin Powell. Remember his little bag of powdered sugar where he said Saddam's going to spray all this over New York, and Wilkerson was so devastated, with his boss just there lying through his teeth to the UN. Even those claims, they're never claims like we have a satellite image of an Iraqi tank brigade in Montreal that's on the verge of coming over the border. That's an imminent attack, and that kind of scenario is what would justify a preemptive strike. If there are tanks amassed on the border and there's guys loading shells into the chambers, into the barrels of the tanks and the artillery, and they're filling up the tanks with gas, and they're all jumping on board, and you hear some radio chatter, and there's a translator who says, they're driving to Washington. Well, yeah, you can intervene at that point. But no one ever says that that's what they're doing. They say, well, they're building something. Okay, well, then what? Well, then they might build it to the next phase. They might enrich it to here, and then they might build a delivery vehicle, and then they might get some intelligence, and then they might learn how to fly it, and then they might drop it on us. And as our old friend Robert Hickson used to say, you can go through the whole analysis of this development of what the weapons procurement people call the development of capabilities. Like a capability is what Aristotle would say a potency. Like it's not something that you're doing, it's a power that you're developing to possibly do something. You may do it, you may not do it. Like a seed is a plant, but until it grows, it germinates and grows in the dirt, it just sits there. It's a tree in potentia, but it's not a tree until you put it in the dirt and water it. A nuclear weapon sitting in a storage facility, it just sits there, right? It's potentially a bomb that goes off. What's the missing link? The missing link is, where's the evidence that the command and control people in Iran or Libya or Iraq or whatever have made the decision, launch this now, or even on any kind of pathway to go from capability to actually deploying a weapon against us? That's the point at which the just war doctrine allows you to get involved. That's why we have air defenses. That's why we have NORAD and all this, the whole establishment that monitors, is someone going to attack us? Is
the missile coming in?
Right. If we were allowed to just attack because of a capability, the question is raised, why don't we assault North Korea? Because they've gone from industrial capability to possessing a weapon, and the reason we don't assault them is because Kim Il-jung had enough brains to say, I'm going to shoot your face off if you come after me. And so he's, as I think it.
Yeah, he's free.
Who is it? Is it McGregor all the time, or someone who says, like, too bad the Iranians didn't go faster because they would have been able to defend themselves?
Oh,
I don't remember. Maybe everybody on the judge is saying that all the time.
They're constantly saying that the big mistake was not to have gone ahead and produced nuclear weapons. And
maybe it is, but let's be. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Let me just say, but how should we admire the Ayatollah for his absolute belief that they are immoral, that they shouldn't be in the world?
And that's you took the words out of my mouth. It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to elaborate. It's just the assuming he had the same view that Ottaviani had and that all serious Catholics have, despite the moral theology manuals from the 50s during the Cold War that say nukes are great and we should use them when we need them. Every sane thinking person thinks that they're a plague. And it's just like it's exactly what undid the guild system. As soon as the baker across the street is open on Sunday, everybody has to open on Sunday or they go out of business. So one guy with a nuke means everybody rushes to get them. And for some, your neocon friends will shoot us with this, but if the Ayatollah is the one guy saying, no, I'm not going to open on Sunday, I don't care who else is, that's something, isn't it?
To be admired,
yeah.
To be totally admired. Yes. I just,
and of course we know from, as this thing about, there's a number of principles that we've hinted at, but one of the things with the just war doctrine is there's a certain amount of certainty. Like if you're going to make this decision to go to war, you have to be certain about the cause. And if you're being told the cause is, well, the other country's about to attack us or they're developing the capability to attack us, it's got to be a certain amount of certainty. And how certain can we be when not only these congressmen come out of the briefings and say that I still don't see it? Because the ones that I forget all the names, I don't pay attention, but the right-wing / Republican congressmen who have been in the news saying, oh, we have to give the commander-in-chief benefit of the doubt. They say nothing about the intel. They just say, well, he knows things that we don't know.
The intel?
What's
intel?
that? Yeah,
intel?
the intel. Yeah, and I'm not saying he has intel as in up here. I'm saying that he has it, on a paper somewhere. But the supporters never say anything about the intel. The critics will say, well, we didn't see any. And then you have the head of the entire intelligence community of the United States, the whole apparatus, all 17, 18 agencies, whatever it is, DIA, Defense, CIA, go down the list, saying this time a year ago, to Congress, we have no evidence and no reason to believe not only that there's production of weapons, but we have no reason to believe that the head of state who put out this religious edict to not pursue a weapon, we have no evidence that that's been rescinded. And you know who I mean, Tulsi, right?
I was just going to say, we have to see what happens with Tulsi. And
she's left the building. I don't know.
Well, she's up again with to I guess report in that same committee or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's coming up, right?
Yeah, and so we'll have to see.
That's the annual. Probably, I don't know if they still call it, but the NIE. When Ray and I were working on the neocon, his essays in neocon, it was the NIE, the National Intelligence Estimate.
You're talking about Ray McGovern.
Yeah, and that's the consensus from all the whole intelligence community. Sort of like the final word, as best as accurate as we can make it, that then's delivered to Congress and the president. And, she's in a horrible position, but I know a lot of the judge people have also asked why hasn't she resigned? I mean, why doesn't someone do something that's like somewhat heroic?
Maybe she's waiting for this particular thing.
That's a very good thought.
Wouldn't that be fun?
One can hope, right? Because she was, she started, as I understand it, my memory's not perfect on this, but she started as a Democrat with this very strong critique of the war in Iraq and a strong critique of the response to 9/11, and she was very good before. So it'd be nice
to believe the official story of 9/11, which is too bad.
Yeah, well, that's in a certain respect that whole thing is like a little bit like the issue with Palestine, that there's some of these fundamental, almost like a tectonic shift, that if you believe 9/11 and you believe that the Palestinians aren't real and that there's just a couple of terrorists, who are upsetting the peace-loving immigrants there, that sets in motion a chain of logic that's very hard to get out of. That's why most people think that all these regimes that support the Palestinians are evil, because they don't see the bigger picture.
But interestingly enough, you don't hear very much about the Palestinians right now. I mean, everything, the focus is off of them, and I don't know what's happening. What's that? If Americans Knew. She I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Allison
Weir. Yeah. She usually, if we pay attention, and I don't watch her all the time or read everything that she sends out, but she kind of keeps you up to date. But I don't know. It's just this whole thing with this war is just so sad with the numbers of people and all of the people being killed, and the fact that our media is so worthless and in collusion with the Red Sea pedestrians, as we like to call
well, like
them.
always, it's hard to know really what's going on too, because even the clips you can get that get released into the internet space, where some of these alternative news things, you don't know how much of it's true. I mean,
True,
I certainly remember watching play by play, sort of snippet of footage by snippet of footage, camera coverage of what was going on in Iraq, having news updates and we're in the I should say for us as Americans, the most tragic thing is you're put in this position. This will be considered hateful by most, of not really being able to root for your country, because you can't possibly hope that we're more successful at killing more people who didn't do anything to us. And it's how the parents of these however many service members are dead now. It's got to be more than it's always more than they report. But what a sort of like unrecoverable tragedy, I mean, and of course, if you're Catholic, then you're waiting to check out, hoping to get to the afterlife as soon as possible, no matter what. But if you're not, it's even worse. But anyway,
I don't know.
It's no good.
Well, I guess to finish up on this, I guess we could say that, first of all, I don't think our administration, all the people involved in it, have a clue what the just war doctrine is. I don't think they certainly don't. If they do know, they don't believe in it. And we're left with unjust wars. And we have been for a long, long time. I guess from the beginning of this country
and I'm gonna lean over here 1 second and grab one of these books. Just a second.
Go ahead. I think what I was going to say is that I think from the onset of this country, the wars have not been just from the beginning.
Yeah, and one of the I don't know if this is going to look backwards,
but it's right for me. It's reading correctly. Is that? Oh, I think
that's number 2.
Yeah.
Saddam
and go ahead.
Well, yeah, Saddam and Tariq Aziz and the Pope and I pledge allegiance to the flag there over on the, whichever side it is. But the subtitle, hypocrisy, lawlessness. I mean, we put that word hypocrisy in there on purpose because for me, my colleague, Derek, who worked on that with me, he was a, Irish radical. So he was ready to go over there with a rifle. But the thing that I find most disturbing through all of it is the hypocrisy. If we could get someone, I mean, so I guess when Trump says, well, I'm going to go through Spain if I want, I mean, at least there's a certain honesty in that, because this constant invocation of the rules-based order and how everyone has to play ball, and the nonstop condemnations of Putin, for getting involved in the Ukraine, and for Milosevic trying to suppress the Kosovars, and this for the last, obviously the last hundreds of years, but certainly the last 20, 30, 40 years of history, every conflict that we're involved in or that we talk about, there's some principle that we contradict with our actions. And it gets very, very tiresome. And it's very sad. Yeah, it's very sad
and very discouraging. Very discouraging. Well, I think this has been good just to visit this topic, John, and to let our audience know and that we're going to just keep fighting and telling the truth, that there is a just war that's allowable, but this is not it.
Yeah, and when it stands to reason that there should be some high bar to get over before you start ending people's lives. I mean, people forget. I don't know how, Americans, Europeans, other onlookers, many of them, I'm not saying all of them, but many of those that support this can just contemplate, you watch on a screen with great distance, you're very removed from the reality, buildings being blown up, societies destroyed, people being blown to pieces, and just shrug as if, well, it's on the other side of the world. What's the difference? We had a family member die recently, Rhonda's cousin of cancer. That was it's horrible. But you think of the grief that, one death from a natural cause like that, which is kind of unavoidable in a way, like that's God's will. You try to be resigned to it, but it causes such suffering. And then we're here killing thousands, blowing up schools full of little girls, and people are like, whatever. It's just, it's
and the people
it's
don't even pay
mind-blowing.
attention to it. They don't even pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I'm sorry, but I have to go play my pickleball or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's so sad. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see these children. I mean, we could go on and on. We've talked about that with some of our interviews, but
well, if we do another one, maybe the thing to get into, which we talked about before coming on, is some of the interesting and inconvenient realities of where does this whole set of principles, or this global, overarching principle of the just war, where does that leave us? What good does it do? Because that's something that, I worry about. We can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but I do think it's mostly ignored. Because it's not like you can send the police to the Pentagon and have them like ring the bell and hand a warrant out for you're under arrest for violating the just war doctrine. Like it doesn't work that way. So what good does that do? And there are some, it's sort of like the nature of government, and this flaw is really built into the whole structure of human society. But I think it might be interesting and worth, getting into it, because at the end of the day, the people who protest, and you remember this thing from a year ago or 6 months ago, where there was I don't remember the name of the group now, but there was a group of pro-Palestinian, an activist group in Britain that was condemned, found illegal. And like, if you're a member of this group, we're going to lock you up. That was eventually overturned by their courts, as I understand it. But just like you don't want to have to be in a position where you can't support your own people that are over there, and you don't want to have to be in a position where you're breaking the law in order to say what you think, in order to try to shoot for something that's right. But the structure of things is such that you almost do have to. That's where it's come to, and that too is probably, certainly goes back to the Catholics in under Elizabeth 400 or 500 years ago were in the same predicament. So it's not anything new for us. And the same, the Christians under the Romans, that was the same situation. But it's just with all, go back to hypocrisy, with all this talk about freedom and religious freedom and openness to everyone's ideas. God help you if you have the wrong idea, because you're going to get run over, by the power of the state while they're running over, our so-called enemies. Well,
God has a plan. And I have to tell you, I just finished reading an old Cardinal Manning treatise called The Pope and the Antichrist.
Yes.
And he did an absolutely magnificent job using scripture and the fathers of the church. And who else am I trying to think of now? But anyway, Daniel, he especially used Daniel to kind of show us where we are today. And when you see this kind of war and this hypocrisy and this immorality and everything else going on, you can't help but think that Cardinal Manning knew what he was writing about.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's kind of sad, and
I would guess for a lot of the MAGA people, it's got to be very disappointing, because just like with Bush 43, we heard, and of course Condi Rice was right, equally responsible for this, as we were coming into the election in 2000. No nation building, no foreign wars, no this, no that, and it just goes on and on and on. And there's always an excuse. This go back to our illustrious Secretary of Defense. There's always some kind of excuse, like, oh well, but this isn't a war. This isn't nation building. This isn't. We're just blowing people up and decapitating their government, and trying to destroy their armed forces and take their oil and restructure their government, but we're not getting involved. We're really not.
Yeah.
So
no, not much.
What a mess. What a mess.
All right, Mr. Sharpe.
So, all right,
Commander Sharpe, thank you for taking the time with us. And
thank you.
We'll see how.
Sorry, it's not a better topic, but
oh well, it's this time where we are. Might as well talk about it. See if we can help people out, but just keep praying. That's the most important thing in the world.
That is very true.
All right,
very true.
And our Lady is the one who we pray to. She's the number one.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. God bless you. All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Regina Caeli, laetare, alleluia, quia clameruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit, sicut dixit,